Hey, take this and bring me another one. Chop, chop.
SEAL Admiral Graves shoved his empty glass into Harper Adams's hand, snapped his fingers in her face.
I'm not staff. I was invited.
He turned, saw a black woman in a plain black dress. No ribbons, no rank. He laughed.
Invited? You?
He looked her up and down, slow.
Looking like that? What's your rank? Dishwasher? Toilet scrubber?
I served in Naval Special Warfare.
Special warfare? Sweetheart, the only thing special about you is the audacity to stand here and waste my oxygen.
Voss.
Who even let her through the door?
Perry.
Nobody. Lieutenant Commander Perry, things like that just slip in.
200 officers. Dead silence. Not one spoke up. Harper set the glass down, held his stare. The sniper ink under her sleeve was about to ruin this man. Man, this story still gives me chills. Let me take you back to where it all started. The man who laughed at her rank would be standing at attention before midnight. But at 7:14 on a Friday evening, when Harper Adams walked through the double doors of Chambers Hall at Naval Station Norfolk, not a single soul in that ballroom knew what was coming. The annual Navy Distinguished Service Gala was the kind of event where careers got made over cocktails and ruined over handshakes. Chandeliers threw gold light across 200 dress uniforms. Whites, blues. Ribbons stacked 5 rows deep on chests that had bled in 4 different theaters. The air smelled of brass polish and expensive cologne. Every handshake lasted exactly 2 seconds. Long enough to assert rank, short enough to move on. Waiters in black vests navigated between round tables draped in white linen. Each place setting held a program embossed in gold. Names, ranks, service records printed in serif font like obituaries for the living. At the center of the room, one man pulled every conversation toward him like gravity. Rear Admiral Raymond Graves. SEAL teams. 3 combat deployments. A silver star pinned so long ago the ribbon had faded at its edges. 6'2", silver hair cropped tight, jaw locked in the permanent half-smile of a man who believed every room he entered belonged to him. When Graves spoke, people leaned in. When he paused, people waited. His laugh cut through every other voice like a blade across glass. Captain Lyle Voss held his right flank. Lean, sharp-featured, the kind of officer who finished Graves' sentences with agreement. Lieutenant Commander Drew Perry held the left, 2 bourbons deep, already loud enough to draw looks from the next table. Harper walked in alone. No dress uniform, no ribbons, no nameplate. A simple black dress that ended below the knee. Low heels, hair pulled back in a tight knot. No jewelry except a thin silver watch on her left wrist. A black woman, at a gala where the faces were almost entirely white and the power was entirely male. She could have been a caterer arriving late. She could have been someone's civilian guest who wandered into the wrong ballroom. She was neither. She paused at the threshold. Her eyes swept left to right. Entrance points, exit routes, window sightlines. The scan took under 2 seconds. Nobody would have caught it. Nobody, except someone trained to do the exact same thing. She took a glass of water from the nearest tray. Not champagne, not wine, water. Then she crossed to the tall windows along the far wall and stood with her back to the glass, facing the entire room. Old habit. Never sit with your back to the door. Never stand where you can't see who's coming. A few officers glanced her way, some curious, some less kind. One wife nudged her husband and whispered something behind her program. An ensign near the bar looked twice, shrugged, turned back to his drink. Across the ballroom, Graves noticed her too. The black woman in the plain dress, standing alone. No uniform, no companion, no apparent reason to exist in his orbit. He tilted his chin toward Voss and said something low. Voss looked over, smirked, and nodded. Harper lifted the water glass. The sleeve of her dress shifted a 1/4 inch up her left forearm. Underneath, just above the wrist bone, a small tattoo caught the chandelier light for half a breath. Crosshairs inside a laurel wreath. Roman numerals beneath. No one saw it. Not yet. Graves didn't walk toward Harper. He marched, the way a man moves when he's already decided the outcome of the conversation before a single word has been spoken. Voss and Perry followed 2 steps behind, a formation they'd practiced without ever being told to. The Admiral's entourage, his echo chamber in dress whites. 3 men approaching 1 woman who stood alone by the window with a glass of water and no uniform. Harper saw them coming. She tracked the approach the way she tracked everything: angles, distance, intent. 3 men, 1 objective. The tallest one leading with his chin up and his shoulders squared. She'd faced worse odds in worse lighting on worse terrain. She didn't move. Graves stopped 3 feet away, close enough to tower over her, close enough that she could smell the single malt on his breath and the starch in his collar. He positioned himself so the light from the chandelier was behind him. Whether he knew it or not, he'd placed himself so she had to look up into shadow. He looked her over, head to toe, slow, the way a man inspects something he's already decided doesn't belong on his property. "So," he smiled. Not warmth, teeth. "I don't think we've met, and I know everyone worth knowing in this room." Harper held the water glass steady. "Harper Adams." Adams. He repeated the name like he was tasting something sour, rolled it around in his mouth, let it sit. "And your rank, Ms. Adams? What exactly entitles you to be standing here, drinking our water at our gala?" The emphasis on "our" landed like a slap across the face. Every officer within earshot heard it. The possessive, the territory. Ours, not yours. You are not one of us. You don't belong here. You have never belonged here. And every person in this room knows it just by looking at you. "I served," Harper said. "Even. Measured. Naval Special Warfare Support. 12 years. Graves blinked. Then the laugh came. Not a chuckle, not a polite exhale. A full, head-back, chest-shaking roar that bounced off the chandeliers and turned heads from 6 tables away. The kind of laugh designed to humiliate. The kind you can hear across a crowded room and know immediately that someone is being made small. Special warfare? He wiped the corner of his eye with 1 knuckle. You? In what capacity? Packing lunches? Folding towels? Voss grinned, right on cue. Maybe she answered the phones. Answered phones, Perry snorted bourbon through his nose. At NSW. That's rich. That's really rich. They fed off each other. 3 men circling the same target, each one pushing the next to go further. This wasn't a conversation. This was a performance. The game was never about finding out who Harper was. The game was about making the outsider feel as small as possible while 200 people watched in real time. And the room was watching. A colonel at the nearest table glanced over, then slowly looked down at his plate. His wife touched his arm, not in solidarity, but in warning. Don't get involved. A commander 2 tables back turned his shoulder slightly, angling away from the scene the way you angle away from a car wreck you don't want to testify about later. An ensign at the bar, young, maybe 23, fresh out of OCS, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. Then he closed it. Then he stared at his shoes and took a long sip of whatever was in his glass. Nobody spoke up. Nobody stepped forward. 200 officers in a room built on the words honor, courage, and commitment, and not one of them could locate any of the three. Graves leaned in closer. His voice dropped, low, private, the frequency men use when they want the words to bruise without leaving evidence. Let me make this real simple for you, sweetheart. Look around this room. Look at these faces. Now look at yours. This is not your room. These are not your people. You are here because someone, somewhere, made a clerical error, and I promise you, tomorrow morning I will find out who that someone is, and I will end their career before lunch. So finish your little glass of water, smile politely, and go back to wherever it is you came from. Am I clear? Every word was a stone, placed deliberately, aimed at the things Harper Adams could never change: her face, her skin, her history, her presence in a world that had spent 2 centuries telling women who looked like her that they didn't belong inside the wire, behind the rifle, or anywhere near a room full of men with stars on their shoulders. Harper didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't recite her service record. She didn't pull rank or demand respect or explain herself to a man who had already decided she was nothing. She just looked at him, the same way she had once looked through a rifle scope at targets 1,600 yards downrange. Steady, patient, calculating. The kind of calm that doesn't come from weakness. It comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of and choosing, deliberately, not to use it. Not yet. Am I clear? Graves said again. Crystal, Harper said. One word, flat. No emotion, no surrender, no retreat. Graves held her stare for 2 seconds, then he snorted, turned on his heel, and walked back toward his circle. Voss and Perry followed, already laughing at something new, already forgetting her, already moving on to the next drink, the next joke, the next person beneath their notice. The ballroom resumed its noise. Glasses clinked, laughter rippled. The moment passed like it had never happened, at least for everyone who hadn't been standing in it. Harper stayed by the window, water glass steady, spine straight, pulse even. But her left hand, the one nobody was watching, had curled into a fist so tight her knuckles had gone white against her dark skin. Harper Adams was born in a town called Whitehall, Montana. Population 4,000. 1,800 of them white. The rest didn't get counted unless someone needed a number for a grant application. Her father, James Adams, was a hunting guide. Black man in a white man's profession in a white man's state. He ran elk hunts in the Tobacco Root Mountains for wealthy clients who sometimes tipped well and sometimes called him boy in front of their teenage sons. He never flinched at either. He just reloaded and kept walking. Her mother, Clara, worked the front desk at the only motel in town. Night shifts, 7 days a week during hunting season. She kept a Bible by the phone and a .38 in the top drawer. And Harper never figured out which one Clara reached for more often. Harper learned to shoot before she learned to drive. Her father put a .22 rifle in her hands when she was 9 years old. By 12, she could hit a tin can at 200 yards. By 15, she could drop a running deer at 400 in crosswind and place the bullet exactly where it needed to go. Through the heart, clean, no suffering. Her father taught her that. You don't shoot to wound. You shoot to end it. One round, one result. Everything else is cruelty. She enlisted in the United States Navy the week after her 19th birthday. Recruiter in Bozeman looked at her. young black woman, 5'7", 130 pounds, and suggested administrative roles: data entry, supply chain, human resources, safe tracks, comfortable tracks, tracks where women who looked like her were expected to go and stay. Harper said no. She wanted combat support. The recruiter laughed. Not as loud as Graves would laugh 20 years later in that ballroom, but the same frequency, the same pitch. The laugh men give when a woman says something they think she doesn't have the right to say. She got in, anyway. Boot camp at Great Lakes was where the whispers started. The black girl from Montana who could outshoot every man in her platoon. Not by a little, by a lot. Qualifying day, she put every round inside the 10 ring while the men around her were still adjusting their sights. The drill instructor, a 20-year veteran named Chief Hollis, watched her shoot, said nothing, then walked to the base commander's office and made a phone call. 2 weeks later, Harper received orders she didn't expect. Scout Sniper School. The pipeline. The crucible that broke 70% of the men who attempted it and had never, not once in its entire history, been completed by a woman. She arrived at the schoolhouse carrying one duffel bag and 0 expectations from anyone around her. The other candidates looked at her the way Graves had looked at her tonight, like she was in the wrong room, like someone had made a mistake, like the correction would come soon enough and the natural order would reassert itself. It didn't. Harper passed every phase. Long-range marksmanship, stalking, observation, fieldcraft. She excelled not because she was stronger than the men around her. She wasn't. But because she was more patient, more still, more willing to lie in the same position for 14 hours without moving a muscle, breathing through her diaphragm, waiting for the one moment that mattered and letting everything else pass. Snipers don't fight battles. They end them. One trigger pull at a time. Her instructors stopped calling her Adams by week 6. They called her Ghost, because she moved through terrain like she wasn't there, because she completed field exercises and nobody could identify where she'd been, because she could set up a hide site 30 yards from an observation team and remain invisible for 72 hours straight while they searched for her with thermal optics. Ghost. The name stuck. It followed her through 3 deployments and 9 classified operations. It was whispered in briefing rooms she never entered and debriefing reports she never read. Somewhere in the naval special warfare community, the legend of Ghost grew. A sniper who operated alone, who never missed, who saved lives from distances so great the people being saved never heard the shot. Her record confirmed it. Confirmed kill at 2,100 yards, crosswind, downhill angle, a shot that required adjusting for the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth. She made it on the first trigger pull. The record stood unchallenged for 9 years and counting. But the mission that defined her, the one that would eventually bring a SEAL Admiral to his knees in a Norfolk ballroom, was Operation Silent Ridge. The details were classified. What the file said, in language stripped of emotion and printed in 12-point courier, was this: a 9-man SEAL team conducting a nighttime extraction in hostile territory was ambushed, pinned down, outnumbered, communications jammed, no air support available for 47 minutes. Estimated survival window? 12 minutes. A single sniper, call sign Ghost, was positioned on a ridgeline 1,400 yards south of the ambush site. Acting without orders, without communication, without confirmation of friendly positions, Ghost engaged 4 hostile shooters in 11 seconds. 4 rounds 4 kills. The suppressive fire broke the ambush. The SEAL team extracted with 0 casualties. The team leader filed an after-action report requesting identification of the sniper. The request was denied. The file was classified at a level that required congressional authorization to open. The 9 men who survived that night spent years trying to find out who Ghost was. They never did. The team leader's name was Lieutenant Commander Raymond Graves. Harper served 12 more years after Silent Ridge. She earned the sniper ink, the tattoo on her left wrist, crosshairs inside a laurel wreath, with Roman numerals beneath marking the number of Tier 1 operations completed. Only a handful of snipers in Navy history had ever earned that mark. She was the only woman. She retired at 31. Quietly. No ceremony. No fanfare. She moved back to Montana, bought a small house outside Whitehall with a view of the mountains where her father had taught her to shoot, and took a job teaching archery to kids at a community center. She told no one about her service. She told no one about Ghost. She put the medals in a shoebox under the bed and let the years pass like spent brass casings, used, discarded, rolling into corners where nobody looked. The invitation to the gala arrived 3 weeks ago. She almost threw it away. She wished she had. Nah. Imagine you saved someone's life, like literally kept them breathing, and years later, they look you dead in the face and ask if you fold towels. Would you keep your cool? Because I know I wouldn't. Harper moved away from the windows after Graves left. Not retreat, repositioning. There was a difference, and she'd learned it long before she ever put on a uniform. She found a seat at a table near the back corner of the ballroom. The table was half empty. 2 retired lieutenants and their wives, polite but uninterested. The kind of couples who came to these events for the open bar and the shrimp cocktail and left before the speeches got long. She sat with her back to the wall, facing the room. Water glass centered in front of her, hands in her lap. A man appeared at the empty chair beside her. Mind if I sit? Master Chief Petty Officer Warren Sullivan, late 50s, built like a fire hydrant, face weathered by salt air and decades of service that had taken him from the engine rooms of destroyers to the briefing rooms of Special Warfare Command. He was the kind of man who didn't need to announce his rank because his presence did it for him. Harper looked at him for a moment, assessing. Then she nodded. Sullivan sat down. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask her rank, didn't look at her dress or her lack of ribbons or any of the things Graves had used as ammunition 10 minutes earlier. He just sat there, settling in, the way a man sits when he plans to stay a while. Saw what happened over there, he said quietly. Not pity, just acknowledgement. Harper said nothing. Graves is a piece of work, Sullivan continued. Always has been. Brilliant operator. Terrible human being. The kind of man who measures everyone by what they can do for him and discards them when the answer is nothing. I've met the type, Harper said. I bet you have. They sat in silence for a moment. Sullivan studied her without being obvious about it. The way she held her hands, relaxed but ready. The way her eyes never stopped moving across the room, tracking exits and entrances like she was running a mental checklist on a loop. The way she sat, spine straight, shoulders square, weight distributed evenly on both feet even while seated. Habits that didn't come from office work. Habits that came from field work. The kind of field work where sitting wrong could get you killed. He noticed something else. She hadn't chosen this seat by accident. The table was in the back corner, yes, but it was also positioned with clear sight lines to both exits, the main stage and the VIP tables where Graves and his circle were seated. A tactician's seat, a sniper's seat. Sullivan filed that away and said nothing. On the stage at the front of the room, a podium had been set up with the Navy Distinguished Service seal. The MC, a captain from the Public Affairs Office, was shuffling papers and testing the microphone. The program listed the evening's events: opening remarks, dinner service, a keynote address, and a special recognition ceremony for an exceptional veteran whose service remains one of the most remarkable in modern naval history. Harper had read that line in the program when she sat down. She assumed it referred to someone at the VIP tables, someone with stars on their shoulders and a chest full of medals. Someone like Graves. She didn't know it was about her. The keynote speaker was introduced. Graves. He took the stage with the confidence of a man who had given 1,000 speeches and enjoyed every single one. The spotlight hit him and he smiled, wide, practiced, photogenic. The kind of smile that made donors write checks and junior officers nod like dashboard bobbleheads. "Tonight," Graves said, gripping the podium with both hands, "we honor sacrifice. We honor brotherhood. We honor the men, and I do mean men, who have given everything for this country." The emphasis was subtle. The message was not. Harper heard it. Sullivan heard it. A few women scattered through the audience heard it too, and looked down at their plates. "This room represents the finest warriors America has ever produced," Graves continued. "Every person at these tables has earned their place. Every single one." He paused, let his eyes drift toward the back of the room, toward the table in the corner, toward the black woman in the plain dress who had no ribbons on her chest and no stars on her shoulders. "Well," he added, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "Almost everyone." Scattered laughter. Quiet, uncomfortable, the kind that fills a room when people laugh because a powerful man expects them to, not because anything is funny. Sullivan's jaw tightened. Harper's expression didn't change. Not a flicker. Not a flinch. She looked at Graves the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray. Clinical, detached, already seeing what's broken underneath. The applause after the speech was loud and sustained. Officers stood. Glasses were raised. Graves soaked it in like sunlight. The MC returned to the podium as the clapping faded. He shuffled his papers again, adjusted his glasses, and leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Admiral Graves. And now, the moment many of you have been waiting for, this evening's special recognition. We are privileged to honor a veteran whose service record is, frankly, unlike anything most of us have ever seen." He paused, looked down at the paper. Classified operations across multiple theaters, a marksmanship record that remains unbroken, and a single mission, the details of which were sealed at the highest level, that saved the lives of 9 Navy SEALs. At the VIP table, Graves set down his glass. Slowly. 9 SEALs. Saved. He knew that story. He had lived that story. He sat up straighter. His smile faded. For the first time all evening, Raymond Graves looked uncertain. Sullivan leaned over. "You all right?" "Fine," Harper said. The word came out flat, controlled. A steel lid pressed tight on a pot that had been simmering for 20 years. "You served in NSW," Sullivan said. It wasn't a question. He said it the way a doctor says, "You've been having chest pains." Not asking, confirming. Harper looked at him, measured. "I said support." "You said support," Sullivan nodded slowly. But you sit like an operator. Spine straight, weight balanced, feet flat, ready to move in any direction. You scan rooms like an operator. Every 15 seconds, your eyes hit both exits and the main entrance. I've been counting. And your hands, he glanced at her fingers, resting still in her lap. Those are trigger hands. Steady. No fidgeting. No micro movements. Hands that have held position for hours without twitching. Harper said nothing. I spent 26 years in naval special warfare, Sullivan continued. Started as a breacher on SEAL Team 4, finished as senior enlisted at NSW Command. I've sat across from hundreds of operators. I know what support looks like. He paused. And I know what the other thing looks like. You're the other thing. Something shifted behind Harper's eyes. A door that had been padlocked for a very long time rattled once on its hinges. She didn't open it. I'm just here for the evening, she said. Sullivan let it go. He didn't push. He didn't pry. He just sat beside her and watched the room with the same patience she did. Two people trained in the art of watching, sitting together in silence while the rest of the ballroom performed for each other. At the VIP table, Graves was no longer smiling. The MC's words had burrowed into something deep. 9 SEALs saved. Classified mission. Sealed file. Graves was staring at his whiskey glass, turning it slowly on the white tablecloth, leaving a wet ring that grew wider and wider with each rotation. His jaw was tight. His eyes had gone somewhere far away, somewhere dark and loud and 14 years in the past. Voss noticed the change. Sir, you okay? Fine. Same word Harper had used, different weight entirely. That mission the MC's talking about, I know it. Which one? Silent Ridge. The name hit Voss like a cold wind. He went still. Every officer in special warfare knew Silent Ridge. The nighttime extraction that turned into an ambush. The 9-man team pinned down with no air support and a 12-minute survival window. The ghost sniper who appeared from nowhere broke the ambush with 4 impossible shots and vanished into classified files that nobody, not even the men who were saved, could access. That was your team, Voss said quietly. That was my team. Graves's voice dropped to barely a whisper. 9 of us, pinned in a creek bed, rounds coming from 3 sides. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. In a ditch, in the dark, in a country I can't even name, in a bar. And then he stopped, swallowed, tried again. 4 shots, 4 kills, 11 seconds, 1,400 yards away. In the dark. Whoever that was saved my life. Saved all 9 of our lives. He stared at his glass. We filed every request we could, tried everything. FOIA, congressional inquiries, back channels. Nothing. The file was locked at a level I've never even seen. All we ever got was a call sign. The MC's voice cut through the ballroom, still building, still revealing. A female veteran, the first and only woman to complete the Navy's Scout Sniper pipeline. Graves's glass stopped rotating. Holder of the longest confirmed kill shot in naval special warfare history. His hand tightened around the glass so hard his knuckles went white. Known within the special warfare community by a single call sign. The ballroom was quiet now, everyone leaning forward. Ghost. The word dropped through the room like a stone into still water. Most of the audience didn't know the significance. To them, it was just a dramatic name. But at the VIP table, 3 men turned to statues. Graves, Voss, Perry, Ghost. The sniper they'd spent 14 years searching for. The shooter who had saved their lives from a distance so great they never heard the rifle. The legend they had talked about at every reunion, every late-night drink, every quiet moment when the memory of that creek bed came flooding back. Ghost was real. Ghost was here. Ghost was being honored tonight. Voss was doing math. Female, sniper, NSW. First woman through the pipeline. His eyes drifted slowly, toward the back corner of the ballroom, toward the table where the woman in the black dress sat quietly beside a Master Chief. The woman Graves had humiliated in front of the entire room. The woman he'd told to go sit in the back. The black woman whose rank he'd asked as a joke. Voss's face drained of color. "Sir?" "What?" "The back table. Corner. The woman from earlier. The one you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Graves turned. Slowly. The way a man turns when he already knows what he's going to see and isn't ready to face it. Harper Adams sat at the back table, spine straight, hands still, eyes on the stage. She wasn't looking at Graves. She wasn't looking at any of them. She didn't need to. Sullivan, beside her, hadn't moved, but a small, knowing smile had settled across his face, the kind that said he'd been waiting for this moment all evening and was perfectly happy to let it unfold at its own pace. He leaned toward Harper, voice low. "They're about to call your name, aren't they?" Harper looked at him. For the first time all evening, something behind her eyes cracked open. Not anger, not triumph. Something older. Something heavier than either. "Yeah," she said quietly. "They are." "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC straightened his papers one final time, "it is my honor, my genuine honor, to introduce this evening's distinguished honoree." The ballroom was silent. 200 officers leaned forward in their chairs. Glasses had been set down. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Even the waiters had stopped moving. She enlisted at 19, completed the Scout Sniper pipeline, the only woman in the history of the United States Navy to do so. She served 12 years in naval special warfare, with 9 classified deployments. She holds the longest confirmed kill shot in NSW history. 2,100 yards, in crosswind, at night. A murmur rippled through the room. 2,100 yards. In the dark. But her most extraordinary achievement remains classified at the highest level. On a night that 9 men in this room remember very well, she single-handedly broke an ambush that had pinned down a SEAL team with no air support and no extraction available. 4 shots, 4 confirmed kills, 11 seconds. Every man on that team walked out alive. At the VIP table, Graves had stopped breathing. Her call sign was Ghost. Her name. The MC looked up from his paper and turned toward the back of the ballroom. Is Harper Adams. 200 heads turned at once. Harper stood up, slowly. The chair scraped against the marble floor, the only sound in a room that had gone so quiet you could hear the ice melting in abandoned glasses. She walked toward the stage. Every step echoed. Low heels on marble. Click, click, click. The sound of a woman crossing a room that had told her she didn't belong. Passing the tables of officers who had watched her be humiliated and done nothing. Moving through the silence that 200 cowards had created and one woman was now filling with the simple act of walking upright. She passed the colonel, who had looked at his plate. He was staring at her now, mouth open, fork frozen halfway to his face. She passed the commander's wife, who had turned her shoulder away. The woman was gripping her husband's arm so hard her knuckles were white. She passed the young ensign at the bar, the one who had opened his mouth and then closed it. He was standing now, rigid, his drink forgotten on the counter behind him. She passed Voss. He had pushed his chair back from the table and was sitting with his hands on his knees, staring at the floor. His face was gray. She passed Perry. Perry hadn't moved at all. He was frozen in the exact position he'd been in when the MC said the name. Bourbon glass raised halfway to his lips, suspended in air, as if time had stopped for him and he hadn't figured out how to restart it. And then she passed Graves. The Admiral sat at the head of the VIP table. His chair was pushed back. His hands were flat on the tablecloth, pressed down hard, like a man trying to stop the room from spinning. His face had gone through every color in the span of 60 seconds, red to white to something gray and translucent that made him look 10 years older than he had looked when he was standing on that stage talking about sacrifice and brotherhood. Harper didn't look at him as she passed. She didn't need to. She could feel his eyes on her, feel the heat of his stare burning through the black fabric of her dress. She kept walking, steady, even, the same pace she had maintained on every approach to every position she had ever held. The sniper's walk. No rush. No hesitation, just forward. As she passed his table, the sleeve of her dress shifted, just slightly, just enough. And there it was, the sniper ink. Crosshairs inside a laurel wreath, Roman numerals beneath. The mark that only a handful of snipers in the entire history of the United States Navy had ever earned. Visible now, under the ballroom lights. Unmistakable to anyone who knew what they were looking at. Graves saw it. He saw the crosshairs. He saw the wreath. He saw the Roman numerals, the count of Tier 1 operations completed. His brain processed what his eyes were showing him, and for a moment, one terrible, crystallizing moment, the past and the present collided. The woman in the plain black dress. The black woman he had told to go back to wherever she came from. The woman whose rank he had asked as a joke. The woman he had called sweetheart and compared to a towel folder and dismissed in front of every officer in this room. She was Ghost. She was the reason he was alive. She was the reason 9 families still had their fathers and husbands. She was the shooter in the dark on that ridgeline 14 years ago, who had put 4 rounds through 4 targets in 11 seconds from 1,400 yards away, while he lay in a creek bed, covered in someone else's blood, certain he was going to die. She had saved his life, and he had just tried to throw her out of a gala. Graves's hands began to tremble. It started in his fingers, a fine vibration that traveled up through his wrists and into his forearms. The glass of whiskey in front of him rattled against the table. Voss reached over to steady it. Perry set his bourbon down with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Harper reached the stage. She climbed the 3 steps without holding the railing. She stood at the podium. She looked out at the room, at the 200 faces staring back at her, at the officers who had laughed, at the officers who had looked away, at the 3 men at the VIP table who had mocked her rank and her appearance and her right to exist in their space. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She didn't say, "I told you so," or recite her service record, or deliver a speech about justice or equality or the things she had endured to stand where she was standing. She just stood there, a black woman in a plain black dress, no ribbons on her chest, no stars on her shoulders, nothing but a tattoo on her wrist and a service record that outweighed every medal in the room combined. The MC handed her a framed citation. She took it with both hands, nodded once. Then she looked at Graves, not with anger, not with contempt, not with the satisfaction of someone who had been vindicated. She looked at him with something far worse. Understanding. The look of someone who had spent her entire life being underestimated by men like him, and had long ago stopped being surprised by it. That look broke him. Graves pushed his chair back. It scraped against the floor with a sound that cut through the silence. He stood up. His knees were visibly shaking. Voss reached for his arm. Graves shook him off. He stepped out from behind the VIP table. He walked to the center of the ballroom floor. Every eye in the room followed him. He stopped 10 feet from the stage. He looked up at Harper Adams, the woman he had insulted, dismissed, ridiculed, and tried to remove from the room.
And Rear Admiral Raymond Graves, United States Navy SEALs, 3 combat deployments, Silver Star, 32 years of service, did something no one in that room had ever seen him do. He came to attention. Feet together, spine straight, chin up, and he saluted her. Not the casual half salute of a senior officer acknowledging a subordinate. A full, regulation, textbook salute. Held at his brow. Held steady. Held long. His voice came out rough, broken, barely above a whisper that the microphone caught and amplified to every corner of the silent ballroom. I owe you my life. I owe you 9 lives, his voice cracked. And 20 minutes ago, I asked your rank as a joke. He held the salute. His arm trembled. His eyes were wet. Harper looked down at him from the stage. The sniper who had held still for 14 hours. The ghost who had saved 9 men from a ridgeline in the dark. The black woman from Whitehall, Montana, who had been told her entire life that she didn't belong. She looked at him, and she returned the salute. The ballroom erupted. Not with laughter, not with whispers, with applause. 200 officers rising to their feet, chairs scraping, hands clapping, the sound building and building until it shook the chandeliers. The ensign at the bar was crying. The colonel, who had looked at his plate, was standing, clapping so hard his palms were red. The commander's wife had both hands over her mouth. And Graves stood there, salute held, tears running down his face, shaking. The longest silence of his career had ended. What replaced it was something he would never forget. The applause lasted 4 full minutes. Harper stepped down from the stage, holding the framed citation against her chest. Officers she had never met lined up to shake her hand. Some couldn't speak. Some just nodded. The kind of nod that carries more weight than any sentence ever could. A brigadier general with 40 years of service took her hand in both of his and held it. I'm ashamed, he said. I watched what happened earlier, and I didn't do a damn thing. That's on me. Harper shook his hand. Thank you for saying that. It was the most words she had strung together all evening. The young ensign from the bar, the one who had opened his mouth and closed it, was waiting at the edge of the crowd. He couldn't have been more than 23. His eyes were red, and his jaw was working like he was trying to hold something together that wanted to fall apart. Ma'am, his voice broke on the word. I wanted to say something. Earlier, when he...
when they were... He stopped, swallowed, tried again. I should have said something. You're saying it now, Harper said. He nodded, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Then he straightened up and saluted her, crisp, earnest, the salute of a young officer who was learning in real time what the word courage actually meant. Harper returned it. The crowd eventually thinned. The waiters resumed their circuits. Glasses were refilled. Conversations restarted. But the room had changed. The air was different now. Heavier. Charged. The way the atmosphere feels after a thunderstorm has broken the pressure and left everything rearranged. Harper found her way to the balcony. The Norfolk night was warm. June humidity. Salt air drifting in from the harbor. She could hear the distant clang of rigging on sailboats and the low hum of generators from the docked carriers. She set the framed citation on the stone railing and stood there, breathing. For the first time in hours, her hands were shaking. Not from anger, not from vindication, from the cost of holding still for that long. From the effort of absorbing every word and every look and every laugh and returning nothing but silence. The sniper's discipline, hold position, hold breath, hold steady, worked beautifully in the field. In a ballroom full of men who didn't think you deserved to breathe the same air, it was something else entirely. Harper. She turned. Graves stood at the balcony door. He had taken off his dress jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. Without the ribbons and the stars and the pressed white fabric, he looked smaller, older, the kind of man you might pass on the street without a second glance. He stepped onto the balcony, stopped 6 feet away, didn't close the distance. I don't know where to start, he said. Then don't. I have to. He looked at the harbor, at the water, at anything that wasn't her eyes. What I did in there, what I said, that's not... He stopped, shook his head. No, that's exactly who I am. That's exactly who I've been. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it was out of character because it wasn't. Harper watched him, said nothing. I've spent 32 years in the Navy, Graves continued. 3 deployments, 11 commendations. And the thing I'm most proud of, the thing I tell my kids about, the thing I bring up at every reunion, is Silent Ridge. The night we survived. The night someone up on that ridgeline decided we were worth saving. His voice dropped. I've looked for Ghost for 14 years. 14 years, Harper. I've filed requests, I've called in favors, I've sat in offices at the Pentagon and begged people to unseal that file so I could find the person who saved my life and say thank you. He finally looked at her, and tonight I found her, standing alone at a gala in a black dress, and instead of thanking her, His voice broke. He pressed his fist against his mouth and breathed through it. I told her she didn't belong here. I told a black woman who saved my life to go back to wherever she came from. The words hung in the warm night air, heavy, unretrievable. Do you know what the worst part is? Graves said. It's not that I didn't know who you were. It's that even if you weren't Ghost, even if you were just a woman attending a gala, what I did would still be unforgivable. You didn't need a classified service record to deserve basic human decency. And I couldn't even give you that. Harper was quiet for a long time. The harbor sounds filled the space between them. Rigging, generators, the occasional cry of a gull. That night on the ridge, she said finally. I didn't know who you were either. I didn't know your name, didn't know your rank, didn't know anything about you except that you were pinned down and you were going to die in about 4 minutes if I didn't do something. She looked at him.
I didn't save you because you were a SEAL, or because you were an officer, or because of anything you'd done or anything you were. I saved you because you were a human being and you needed help. That's it. That's the whole thing. Graves closed his eyes. A tear tracked down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. I'm going to make this right, he said. I'm personally filing for declassification of your service record. Full disclosure. Every mission, every commendation. The world is going to know what you did. That's not why I came tonight, Harper said. I know. He opened his eyes. But it's what's going to happen anyway. Because people like you don't get to be invisible anymore. Not on my watch. Not after tonight. Sullivan appeared in the balcony doorway. He'd been standing there long enough to have heard most of it. He didn't interrupt. He just leaned against the frame and waited. Graves looked at Harper one more time. Then he extended his hand. Not the 2-second power handshake from the ballroom. An open hand. Extended slowly. Offered. Not imposed. Harper looked at it. Looked at him. The Admiral who had laughed at her. The lieutenant commander she had saved from a creek bed 14 years ago. The man who was trying, badly and late, to become someone worth saving. She took his hand. They shook once, firm, brief, and in that handshake was everything that couldn't be said. Apology, gratitude, shame, forgiveness, and the fragile possibility that people can change when they're finally forced to see what they've been looking at all along.
Graves turned and walked back inside. His shoulders were different now, lower. The weight of the evening had settled into them and wouldn't lift for a long time. Sullivan watched him go, then turned to Harper. Hell of a night, he said. Yeah, Harper said. She picked up the citation from the railing and held it against her chest. Hell of a night. 6 months later, the file was declassified. It took Graves 3 trips to Washington, 2 congressional hearings, and an 11-page personal letter to the Secretary of the Navy. The letter included one sentence that would eventually be quoted in every article written about the case. I have spent my career believing I earned everything I have. I was wrong. A woman I tried to humiliate at a dinner party earned it for me. The Navy Times ran the story on the front page. Ghost revealed. The woman behind the longest shot in special warfare history. Harper's photograph, the first ever published, showed her standing on the porch of her house in Montana, mountains behind her, archery bow in her hand. Not smiling, not posing, just standing there, still and steady, the same way she had stood in that ballroom, the same way she had lain on that ridgeline. The article went viral. 22 million views in 48 hours. The comments became a battlefield. Arguments about women in combat, race in the military, whether Ghost's record should have been sealed at all. Harper didn't read any of it. She didn't have a social media account. She didn't do interviews. When CNN called, she let it ring. When the Pentagon offered her a consulting position, she said no thank you and went back to teaching 12-year-olds how to hold a bowstring. Graves changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, not the way movies show it. A tear, a montage, a new man by the credits. He changed, slowly and painfully, the way people actually change when they've been forced to see the full weight of who they've been. He started a mentorship program for women and minorities entering special warfare pipelines. He gave speeches, different speeches now, with different words. He stopped saying the men who serve and started saying the people who serve. Small shifts, quiet corrections. The kind of change that doesn't trend on social media, but reshapes the air in every room it enters. He and Harper spoke twice a year. Brief calls, never more than 10 minutes. She didn't need his friendship, and he didn't deserve hers. But there was something between them. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. Two people bound together by a night on a ridgeline and a night in a ballroom, each of which had revealed something the other needed to see. Harper still lives in Montana, still teaches archery, still drives the same truck her father left her. On the mantel in her living room sit exactly 2 items: the framed citation from the gala and a photograph taken that evening. In the photograph, Rear Admiral Raymond Graves is standing at attention in the middle of a ballroom floor, saluting a black woman in a plain black dress who is looking down at him from a stage. He is crying. She is not. And if you look closely, very closely, you can see the tattoo on her left wrist. Crosshairs inside a laurel wreath. Roman numerals beneath. The mark of ghost. The sniper ink that changed everything. So the next time you look at someone and think you know who they are based on what they're wearing or where you think they came from, remember this story. Remember Harper Adams. Remember the woman who saved 9 lives and got told to go sit in the back. What would you have done? Would you have been Graves? Or the ensign who opened his mouth and closed it? Drop your answer in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because stories like this one deserve to be told. Man, if that was you in that ballroom, laughed at, humiliated, told to leave